Okay, so I have learned from the morning when I did my first session that I just have to talk louder than the room across from the other side. So if I'm not speaking loud enough, you let me know, and I'll try and outshout them. I also have the fun task of having a session right after lunch. So I have the great duty of keeping you guys engaged and active, and hopefully we'll walk away learning some great tools. My name is Sweta Mistry. I'm coming in from New York, and this is me. This is my contact information. And I'm here to talk to you about building your Scrum Master Toolkit. I really am going to have to speak really loud just to focus. Building your Scrum Master Toolkit, basically the session evolved around the idea that most folks get certified as a certified Scrum Master, or they're placed in the Scrum Master role, and they're armed with the Scrum framework and minimal tools, but then what next? And the reason why I wanted to talk about this a little bit more was because I found that tools that I was very familiar with as a Scrum Master and as an Agile coach, I found that many of my colleagues did not know about. And these are tools that I rely on and I take for granted and I assume everybody knows about. And vice versa, they had tools in their toolkit I had no clue about. So I'm like, what better way than to do a circuit training of different tools, okay? Because I think it's really important to have awareness around what's available, whether we use them or not. So the purpose of this session is we won't go into much detail on all the different tools that I'm going to touch, and I'm touching a lot of them and different ideas. But what I'd like you to do is then walk away and dive deeper on your own, learn more, talk to your colleagues, practice, and see what you can learn and see what you can use. Is that good? Okay, all right, awesome. So, who knows what happens if I do this? Yes, so for those of you not familiar with it, if we're talking in the room and you suddenly see me or somebody else raise their hand and we stop talking, you do the exact same thing, you mirror the same thing. So let's give that a shot. How was lunch today? Start talking about that. Talk to each other. Yeah, it works like magic. Really quick, gets attention in the room, okay? So hand up and you stop talking and everyone just mirrors. Obviously, you'll have to teach the technique to people before you can actually use it. Otherwise, they're just going to wonder what you're doing waving your hand up here, okay? You may just be saying hi, hi. Okay, anyone familiar with the concept of a shout out? Okay, so shout out is basically you shout out. So if I ask you a question, you're just going to shout out. So how's your morning been today? All right, perfect. That's a shout out. Okay. Similarly, there's the idea of popcorn, okay? So if I ask you a question, you basically get up from your chair, give me your statement, and you sit right back down again, and you just do it in any order you want. So how has the conference been so far today for you? Fantastic. Oh, this is good. Okay, all right. Our popcorn's running a little low. Maybe it's too... Okay, I know, it's post-lunch. I'm trying my best, okay? While these are really cool techniques to help facilitate your sessions, especially retrospectives, because you want to make them light and fun, I'll try to use some of these throughout the session as well so that you can actually experience them, okay? So just be warned. All right, so here's where we're going to jump right into an activity. We're going to do 3 rounds of this, okay? I'm going to give you 2 minutes each. You're going to pair up, okay? I'm going to post a couple of statements and questions on the next slide. And for 2 minutes, one person is going to discuss them. And then when I turn on my timer, you're going to swap. The other person will then discuss those questions. When the other timer goes off, you find a new partner. And we do this 3 times, okay? If there's a little bit of confusion, I'll reiterate the instructions. But let's give that a shot. So find yourself a partner. And you feel free to get up, move, walk, find partners at other tables. Find yourself a partner. I'm going to run 2-minute timer. And one person is going to answer or discuss these questions. Go. If you don't have a pair, join a pair and you can be a group of 3. Okay, just within your pairs, if the other person hasn't had a chance to talk yet, you're going to discuss the questions with your partner. Yeah, the other person will now answer the questions. Did you already do it? Did you already do it? Okay, I'll give maybe a little bit more time for everyone else to wrap up. Okay, find yourself a new partner. Move around in the room. Find someone on the other side of the room, someone you haven't talked to already. Okay, swap within your pairs. Now the other person answers the questions. Okay, last round. Find yourself a new partner. Feel free to move around. Okay, swap within your pairs. This is the last piece. awesome. Let's take our seats. So how was that for you guys? Good? How were your interactions? Popcorn going on there. How were your interactions? Awesome. What was that? Very fruitful. Okay. What was different from how you would normally meet people? Was there anything different? Quick to the topic, quicker? Sorry. I'm here in the other room again. I think maybe we'll pass the mic around as well, just in case. Here we go. There you go.
I said that was the time constraint.
Okay, time constraints. Okay, anything else?
You know what to talk about and you are interested in the answer.
Interested in the answer. Anything else? You were standing up. What happens when you stand up? You're quicker. Okay, lots and lots of great responses there. So yes, all of the above happens, okay? So the thing was that we were doing something called actually, let me step back, sorry. We know as a Scrum Master, if you're in the role, this is kind of what you're doing, right? How many of you are actually Scrum Mastering right now? Most of you, yes. So how many of you feel like this? Yeah, typically, right? So you end up doing this, yet you're expected to play multiple roles, wear many, many hats. So you're facilitator, you're mentor, you're coach, you're training, you're teaching, you're doing a ton of different things, right? And what is it that you're doing the most? You're interacting with people, right? So it's quite challenging, usually, to get a group of people into the room together. You may do some icebreakers. How many of you get bored of doing icebreakers? I do, especially if it's the same one, 3 questions again, and what's your little secret and things like that. Okay, so we're trying to find better ways of engaging people, right? And that's a lot of the topics that I'm going to talk about today are going to be finding ways of engaging people in your sessions and also engaging the right people and in the right way and allowing people to own their process. So for that, we need to build out our toolbox, right? So again, like when we kick off on our career as a Scrum Master or anything in the Agile space, we start with a small set of tools, but then we need to build them. We need to understand why we're using them, for what reason we're using them, who we use with them. Sometimes some things aren't quite appropriate with certain groups of people, right? You may need to warm up to, let's say, a group of your stakeholders or your business counterparts. We can eventually get them there. I think we definitely should try to, but you may want to start in a different area, right? So really understanding your toolkit is essential and continuing to build it out and learn from it. Often when you're running some of these exercises, you're going to run into challenges. You're going to make mistakes. That's okay, all part of the learning process, right? And that's what you do. So what we had just done was something called Liberating Structures. So that is the first of 4 topics that I'd like to cover with you guys. Who's familiar with Liberating Structures? A few of you? Yeah. So I'm seeing quite an engaging approach to liberating structures. They've been around for a while, but I'm seeing a lot of groups, both in the US and globally, like talking about liberating structures more and using them. You may even inadvertently be using it already without knowing it. For many years, I've been using open space, I've been facilitating open space, but I never knew it was a liberating structure until quite recently. So you may be doing a lot of these things already that you may not know what it's called. So it's quite useful to name the thing, because then often you can dive deeper and find out more about it, why it exists, and what else you can learn from it. And also, connect with other people who are doing this, because there are, like for liberating structures, for example, a lot of user groups that are popping up and have been that practice these regularly since it's a growing area of interest. So liberating structures, to dive in a little bit deeper, there's a whole book on it, and for many of the things that we're going to talk about today, there are books on these things, so I am really, really just hitting the tip of the iceberg, so please don't walk away from here saying that you are an expert on the topic or that I taught you everything you need to know, because someone's going to come back and hammer me for that, okay? So this is the tip of the iceberg. It's really to kind of get you interested in the topic and go and learn more about it. There are 33 liberating structures. This is what it allows you to do. It helps you to engage in a way that's quick. It allows you to own the process. The content is coming from you. The direction is coming from you. If you noticed, I didn't really do anything once I gave you the instructions. I could step away. And that's exactly what we want to do because the power is in the crowd. Okay, we want the answers to come from you guys, okay? The one particular exercise that we did was something called Impromptu Networking, which is just, you guys go for it. The one thing that I did to help facilitate the session was I gave you direction in the questions because I knew that was the topic I wanted you to focus on. I also wanted to ask you what you're willing to give back to the session as well. So that's very important as well. It's not only what are you giving, but what are you taking as well, right? It's a two-way street. So hopefully you built new connections as well and you got to talk to people that you haven't talked to before. The approach that lets you go quick almost gives you no moment to think who you're going to go talk to next. Often when you're kind of in these ice-breaking sessions or trying to connect with people or networking, you're like, oh, do I approach this person? Should I go there? Should I not go there? This is quick, right? It's rapid, so you just don't even have a moment to think about that sometimes, and you can just kind of go, 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 all right? And hopefully you talked about the content, which is exactly what you're trying to make rise out of the session. Liberating structures overall are based around something called microstructures. Microstructures, if you think about it, are broken down into 5 key concepts, and they are the smallest structure within every liberating structure, and probably most meetings, but it's how we apply them, which is what matters. So the 5 microstructures are structuring an invitation. So where did I structure an invitation to you when we did impromptu networking? Can anyone think of that? So I invited you to participate by saying that we were going to give you the questions to respond to. Okay, so that was my invitation to you. The second one was, how is the space arranged and what materials are needed? What materials were needed? No materials, right? Just you yourself. How was the space structured? Open enough that you could walk around, right? If you were doing this in a large crowd, you might just have an empty room, okay? But we had enough space to move around, so that was your structure. How was participation distributed? Impromptu, exactly, right? You guys owned it. I didn't have to tell you how to do it. I didn't say, okay, you guys pair up and then you over here pair up with it. I didn't have to give you any instructions. You guys owned it, right? How were the groups configured? In pairs, right? I said you pair up, okay, once you're done, you then find a new partner and you pair up again, right? So pairing was the configuration. And then the sequence of steps and time allocation. Yeah, we had 3 rounds, okay? We switched partners, and then even within the pairs, we were switching the conversation, and I time boxed those for you to give you an idea on when to change, right? So there was distributed participation. So you can clearly see liberating structures is a really good way to rapidly make connections, rapidly get to the point, and you know there's 33 and growing aspects of this, so you can practice and experiment with all of these. The beauty about these is you don't need to be an expert in anything. There's a wonderful website, liberatingstructures.com, or maybe .org.com, yep. There's the book on it, and there's a free app for it as well. It gives you all the details there, so download that. It's on hand, and you can use it that way. So, overall, tiny shift in the way that you meet and distribute conversation is really what we're trying to do. We want you to own the process, okay? We want it to be productive. We want everyone involved. We don't want people feeling like they can't participate, and we want it to be quick, and it's seriously fun. So hopefully you had serious fun doing that, okay? All right, any questions on liberating structures? Because now we're gonna move on to our next circuit. Cool, all right. The next one I wanna talk to you about is training from the back of the room. Is anybody familiar with this? One person, okay, all right. So let me talk to you about that a little bit. So training from the back of the room is, actually, let me introduce you to the brains behind training from the back of the room. Sharon Bauman is the person who is a trainer. She's a researcher. She's an author. And she introduced the idea of training from the back of the room, which basically means as a facilitator, you step away and you're in the back of the room and the session kind of drives itself. It's all based on brain science. So what makes us become better learners? And that's essential. How are we going to retain the information better, or how are participants going to retain the information better, learn it quickly, and be able to apply it quickly? And that's the key behind her training. So she's got, a multitude of courses that go out there, but also a couple of books, well, not a couple actually. These are the 2 key books that are for the actual certification, but she's got several other books that give you great tips and ideas around using brain science to do good facilitation. And she's got a wonderful website where she's always writing and blogging and putting some great tips out there as well. One of the areas of training from the back of the room is called the 6 trumps. And these are learning principles, okay? And these are, again, focused around the brain, okay? And the 6 trumps are images trump words, okay? Talking trumps listening. Writing trumps reading, shorter trumps longer, different trumps same, and movement trumps sitting. Okay? Let's go into each one of those. Movement trumps sitting. So, when we're sitting, okay, and we're learning, and I'm talking, and you're listening, okay, it gets kind of boring. Oxygen becomes stagnant to your brain, okay? And if we're just consistently sitting, how many of you sit at your day job? How many of you sit in sessions and lessons and college and things like that? Most of us? I do, and it gets quite frustrating because often I feel like I'm burnt out even before I've started, or I need to just get up and get some fresh air, right? Because my brain can't think. So oxygen becomes stagnant to your brain, which means you need to get some up there to be able to retain the information you're doing or work productively. The quickest and easiest way to get oxygen to your brain is by movement. Okay, so let's just try that for a moment. Let's just get up for a second. Let's just stretch around a little bit. Maybe it's post-lunch, so I'm trying my best to keep you guys active. Okay? All right, awesome. You can take a seat. So even that, right, in itself gave you kind of a shot of oxygen going up to your brain, right? So hopefully that makes you more engaging, right? So sitting definitely, decreases your oxygen levels. You want to introduce some level of movement to your sessions. About every 10, 20 minutes or so, okay? If you can get people to just get up, maybe move around the room, go find a partner on the other side of the room, get up, stretch maybe, stand up while they're responding or answering a question, that's movement in itself, okay? It's just the sitting, it really just doesn't help. So that's what we want to do to get people engaging quite frequently and more actively, and also to retain knowledge. Talking trumps listening. Now, if I'm up here and I keep talking to you, and I'm talking to you, and I'm talking to you, who do you think is doing the most learning? Any thoughts? Me. Absolutely right. Because when you're talking, your brain is also processing that information, okay, and you're learning the most. That's not my intention when I'm running a session. I want you to learn the most. So who should be doing the talking? You guys should be doing the talking. Absolutely, right? It's the best way to do talking, to learn, is to teach it back. So if you're able to introduce into your sessions frequent exercises or something to teach back to each other, to pairs, to partners, to groups, that's going to really help you retain information a lot more. Okay? Writing trumps reading. So writing typically comes from your hand. Your hand is a whole brain-based activity, right? It activates neurons in all parts of your brain. So the beauty about that is because it's engaging your brain fully, you're more likely to retain information and more likely to participate more engagingly, okay? So what we're saying is instead of having you guys read information, so if I have a PowerPoint presentation, slide after slide after slide, and I just have you read it, it's kind of boring, disengaging, and you're probably not retaining information as much. I'm going to ask you to maybe write something. Okay? Write what you just learned. Write the top 5 things that we just talked about. Things like that are going to, again, help you process the information. The action of actually, having a tool in your hand and writing will actually help kind of decompose information in your brain in a way that you can help chunk it and retain it better. Okay? Shorter trumps longer. What do you think that means? Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know if you heard that. Shorter amount of times that we have to listen to something or just learn something. So we have, your exact words, I can't remember, so to assimilate the information better, right? So yes, we're saying we want to change the frequency of things, right? So keeping that frequency short of exercises, engagement, activity, hence my idea behind the circuit training, like go quick, 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 okay? You know, it's going to, again, get you engaged. It's going to keep your brain active. It's going to keep you going with not only the oxygen, but also the whole processing, cognitive processing aspect of learning. So as I teach information, or as you teach information to your class or to your participants, try and bring it in gradually, right? So basically with that, what you mean is don't give them like a chunk of information like, okay, here, I'm going to give you a 30-minute lecture, now go do something. Okay, and that's typical traditional teaching, right? It's just like you listen, you listen, you listen, and then you're like, okay, off you go, now go do some homework or go write an assignment. You're like, what did we just talk about? Okay, what we're saying is introduce the information in short pieces, okay, do something with it, and then come back. Another short chunk, it might be the same information, do something with it, and then come back. The shorter time chunks are going to allow you to retain and just process better, okay? Different trumps the same. So what that basically means is, again, if I'm giving you just a bunch of slides, or if I'm just talking, or even if I just have you just write for an hour or 30 minutes, your brain is going to get bored, okay? So your brain will react better when there's typically, if there's some kind of emotion involved in the activity that you're doing, and that may not be the case typically at work or in school or whatever you may be doing, but your brain tends to go towards ideas that are novel or different. So if your brain is used to just seeing the same old thing, right, or let's just say your commute to work, right, and you're taking the same path, right, day in, day out, how many times when you're driving the car do you even notice how many lights you went through or how many crossings you went through? Do you notice if you're driving? You don't. Now, what if you decide to go around a different block the next day, or you change directions, or you're going to say, I'm going to go a completely different route? You pay more attention, right? Because it's novel, it's new, it's different to you, all right? So because your brain is also not familiar with it, it's also kind of looking out, like what else is going on there, right? So it's going to be much more engaging. So again, when you're running sessions, try and change things up. Introduce the information in bits and chunks, okay? Your brain also learns better in chunks of information. So it's much more useful. And then images trumps words. So this is very similar to writing over reading, because again, if you're drawing anything, it's a whole brain activity. But if you're not drawing and you're just looking at things visually, images and imagery in general helps to be retained better. Research shows that for visualization, your brain seems to have almost an unlimited capacity compared to written material, okay? So think about that when you like walk out of a meeting or some session and you've just learned a few slides, right? How much of that do you really retain compared to if I just started showing you a bunch of pictures? How many of you remember the circuit training picture I showed you in the beginning? Yeah? It stuck more versus had I said, okay, we're going to do a bunch of different activities. It's like circuit training. They're going to be different, blah, 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 right? You're more likely to engage with that image rather than me talking about it. So whatever you can visualize, right, try to visualize. And I'm kind of breaking my rules with these particular slides because I know it's a lot of words, but I wanted to just hit the points, okay? So imagery has a lot of power in it. So let's try it, okay? I am going to have you stand up, so we're going to have some movement. Find the person opposite you, or if it's hard to find someone different on the same table, find someone on the other table. And just for a few minutes, just talk to them, find out what the 6 trumps were. Just let's see if you can record those 6 trumps. So let's move around a little bit, find a new partner. Oh, no, absolutely. Say trumps. Yes, absolutely. I will give them, absolutely, I will give the slides, yes. Okay, let's take our seats. On each of your tables, it worked this time. On each of your tables, I've put some worksheets out. So let's just close out the 6 trumps by, each of you should have enough worksheets for each person. So just jot down your 6 trumps and do a quick drawing for them. So you've got 6 boxes in there. Write down each of the 6 trumps, see if you can record them correctly, and then do a quick sketch or drawing for them. Yes, there are more sheets up front if there aren't enough, and I think there's some extras on some of the tables as well. You write down the 6 trumps and also draw a quick picture for them. There we go. Sorry, I didn't move the slide. That's the power of visualization. Okay, does everyone feel good about those 6 trumps? Should we go through them real quickly? Yep. Anyone want to shout out the first one?
Movement over sitting.
Absolutely. What about another one? Sorry, you go first and then.
Writing over hearing.
Writing over listening, yes.
Short trumps.
Yes. 3 more? So shorter trumps longer. Yep. Anyone recall the others? Different, trump same, yep. Images trumps writing, yep, absolutely. Did we cover all 6? Kind of lost track now. Yep, good. Movement trumps sitting, yes, absolutely. Okay, I think that was 6 there. Okay, does that make sense? Why some of those are good learning principles? Yeah? Okay, all about brain science. So again, this is just one area of the brain science Sharon talks about. If you're interested in learning more, like she's got a lot of different exercises and things like that. That's, again, based all on brain science. So these are good learning principles. Okay, so the next thing I'd like to talk to you about is qualities. What do I mean by qualities? Can anyone take a stab at that? So if I'm a Scrum Master building out my toolkit for this session, and we're talking qualities, what might we be talking about? Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what makes a good Scrum Master? Now, for some folks, these may not be the right fit, but I think from my experience so far, and I've been in the Agile space over a decade, I've definitely seen the qualities that we're going to talk about are super, super important and kind of take it to the next level when it comes to engaging with your teams and stakeholders and all sorts of different people. So does anyone want to shout out some of the qualities that might be good for a Scrum Master? Patience, okay. What else? Anything else? Open-minded, nice. Active listening. Oh, you hit the nail on the head. I'm sorry, I can't hear from the... Modest? Is that, okay, all right. Sorry, I can't hear from here. I'm hearing the other person. Humble, yes, that's a beautiful quality, absolutely. So all the qualities that you guys just shouted out are definitely underlying to some of the things that I'm going to talk about. I've categorized them slightly differently and maybe missed a few of them, but these are the ones that I'd like to talk to you about. I find these are key in understanding other people, understanding yourself, okay? EQ is kind of at the top. I should probably redesign this slide to kind of have it more of a pyramid because all the rest of it underneath it kind of falls under EQ, okay? EQ is broad. It's also quite new as a science, as research. Oh, see? And this is me making assumptions. This is my low EQ, making assumptions that everybody knows what EQ is. EQ is emotional intelligence, or the Q for emotional quotient, okay? So simple things like that. You will make simple mistakes like that. Making an assumption is like the biggest blah you can make, right? And that's exactly what I just did. So great example also. So you just helped me with my session. Thank you. So that's exactly what we want to talk about, okay? And we'll do some exercises around that as well. So the one thing I'm going to also add here, and this you can apply to any session, is you have the right to pass. So when you're working with teams, offer them the right to pass, especially when you start talking about things that might get a little more sensitive, might get a little bit closer to heart, might make some people uncomfortable. Offer the right to pass. So at this point onwards, I'm offering you the right to pass. So if you feel like at any point in time in any of the exercises you do not want to participate, you don't have to. That's completely fine, okay? And we respect that. We don't ask you why. We don't question it. That's your choice, and you're absolutely allowed to have that. Make sense? Okay? Cool. So we are going to do another exercise. So I have up here some index cards, and I'd like for you all to just grab an index card each. And I think I've put big chunks in the front, so if you can just pass them back, please. Everyone gets one index card. And grab a pen or pencil or something to write with as well. Okay, so we are going to get up because we like movement over sitting. All right, we are going to walk around the room. Okay, we are going to walk around the room. You are going to imagine you're in an art gallery. So truly imagine you're in an art gallery. You haven't seen these people before. As you go around the art gallery, you're going to pass by people, and you're not going to make eye contact with anybody. You are purposefully not going to make eye contact with anybody. So just start walking around the room. I'm going to give you 2 minutes for this. Just walk around the room. Don't make eye contact with anyone. It's a really big art gallery. You're walking around the room and do not make eye contact with anyone. Okay, I'm going to stop you there. Just wherever you're standing is fine. Just jot down your feelings on the card. Just what you felt in this moment or going through that exercise. Okay, once you've jotted that down, we're going to do this again, okay? So walk around. This time, you're going to seek eye contact, but as soon as you make eye contact, you're going to break away, okay? So still in your art gallery, seek out eye contact, but then break away. Okay, I'll stop you there and just take a moment and jot down your feelings for that round. Okay, once you're done with that, our third round, okay, this time you're going to seek eye contact. When you make eye contact with the person, you pair up with them, stand side by side next to them, but then you don't look at anyone else. Okay? Go. You don't look at anyone else. When you make eye contact with the first person, just stand next to them, don't make eye contact with anybody else. Keep in mind you're in an art gallery. Okay, seems like everyone's paired up, so take a moment, jot down your feelings on your card. You can come back to your tables if you want for this. Okay. So take your seats and keep your cards to yourselves once you're done. So let's debrief that exercise a little bit. If you're comfortable sharing, okay, how did that feel? How did making eye contact and breaking it away affect the way you interacted with somebody? Creepy. Uncomfortable. Uncomfortable? Awkward? Okay. Funny. Some of you were laughing. I noticed that. Yeah. So that's a really interesting take, right? So some people feel awkward. Some people get quiet because we're in an art gallery. Some people laugh, right? And some people find it funny. Why the differences? Any ideas on that? Yeah. A lot of good stuff here. Perception is not the same. Background, you're different, right? Personality. So there's a lot going on in a group of people, even if you're looking at the same content, you're here for the same purpose. There's a lot of things that could change people's behaviors. We can react differently. We can behave differently. Our cultural backgrounds make an impact on how we behave and react, right? There could be a lot of unknowns about each other. So these are all things that we want to consider when we're working with a team, especially now that we're getting into more of a global space, right? We need to become more aware about things like that. And it's very easy when you have the mic in your hand or you're kind of standing in that facilitation place to kind of be keeper of the process and just think that, you know, with all good intention, you're trying to just get the team to come together and achieve something. There's a lot of underlying factors that we're probably not seeing and we run into that we're not aware of, right? So we really want to hone in on that and be careful about things like that and just make sure we're recognizing things. Now, for instance, if you see someone who was just really, really quiet, not necessarily in this particular exercise, but a similar environment, right? What might you do differently if you're seeing half the room laughing or finding things funny? Yeah, you may need to change the rules. You may need to find out or do a little research about that person or you know, in the best of intention to find out why they were behaving differently, because maybe there's something that you just said that was completely offensive to them and you didn't even realize, right? So a lot of the times, again, because we're on go, go, go and we don't kind of pause to reflect or take in all the information, And again, from the Scrum Master's perspective, coaching perspective, teaching perspective, I see so many good Scrum Masters. And when I coach them and they're like, you know what, I had this issue with this person and I can't put my finger on it. And when you kind of ask the questions to probe into, well, have you thought about, backgrounds, culture, kind of what might be going on in their life, outside of work at this point, those things could be affecting them. So just being more mindful about those can help raise our EQ. Now, compared to IQ, the understanding, or at least research shows, is that IQ is somewhat fixed, right? From kind of when you're like 15 to 50, like your IQ is about kind of the same range, right? But with EQ, the beauty about EQ is, let's say you're born with 0 EQ, EQ can grow and change over time. You can learn EQ, okay? So a lot of people think that, I don't have EQ because I wasn't born with EQ. Don't worry about it. You can learn EQ. The thing about EQ is you have to be intentional about it. You have to pay attention to learning about it. You have to pay attention to reading the room, kind of reading people, kind of trying to understand different perspectives from other people. You just need to be more open-minded and kind of pace yourself into understanding what else might be going on, okay? And there's different levels of EQ that you will run into, but it's something that can be learned, okay? It's not that, you either have it or you don't. It grows and changes over time. There's different schools of thought around EQ. This is one way of breaking down EQ: empathy, self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, and social skills. So empathy, I'm going to go into deeper about it because I'm just very passionate about that topic. Self-awareness, we'll touch upon it a little bit. I'm going to talk to you just a little bit about self-awareness, so coming from yourself, but also awareness of others, because I think it does go a little bit broader than just yourself. Self-regulation is really catching yourself in the moment. Your brain has about 6 seconds to make a decision when you're in any particular situation, especially if you're in a fight or flight situation. Who's familiar with the fight or flight brain hijack? Okay, so let me talk about that a little bit more. So, just put this down. So if you think about your brain, okay, and if this is your spinal cord, okay, this is your kind of central emotional area. If you put your thumb like that and you put your hand over it, that's your cortex, or prefrontal cortex. This is where all your processing is going on. This piece in the middle is kind of where all your emotional aspects are going on. So when some kind of sensory information comes into you, it's going up your spinal cord, hits that emotional center in the middle, and then your brain decides to process it in whichever way possible, right? So 6 seconds between making that decision on how that processing happens. So there's fight, flight, or freeze even, okay? So those are ways that you may react in a particular situation depending on what's going on. Now, the reason why our emotional center is used to behaving that way is because back in caveman days, we were usually running away from some threat. It could be a saber-toothed tiger or a mammoth trampling us down, right? So we were always on alert, like, okay, do we fight, do we flight, do we freeze? What do we do? Like, do we run away from this threat that's coming at us? Nowadays, we're in that situation more often than not, stress, right? So our body is constantly fighting that fight or flight response, right? Because it's always trying to analyze, okay, I'm going in a meeting. It's with my manager of managers. Is it going to go bad? Like, that's a stress response, right? So your brain is trying to make that decision. It's not a saber-toothed tiger, but the body reacts in the way that a saber-toothed tiger is coming. So that's why the self-regulation aspects of things are literally a window of about 5 to 6 seconds for you to make that decision, to maybe just take a deep breath, calm yourself down, okay? Or just decide, whether, okay, I'm not going to attend this meeting. Whatever your reaction is, you have about 5 to 6 seconds to make that decision before the additional processing goes on. Motivation is pretty straightforward. You have intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, right, in the sense of what drives you, okay, so that you want to be aware of. There's going to be things that drive you. There's going to be things that drive the people that you're working with and collaborating with, okay? So just if you can hone in on what's driving the people that you work with, that's going to help you to get to whatever goals you need to achieve, because maybe you can ingrain those motivations into your aspect of goal achieving. Social skills, I think that's kind of all the above, right? It just wraps up into one big bundle, right? Just, again, being aware is a key aspect of things, but you want to just make sure that you're just being kind, empathetic, to each other, like, really taking in other people's opinions, being open. I think somebody mentioned humbleness and openness earlier. I think those are key aspects of social skills. So let's move on from, I think that was my last slide on EQ. Okay, last point on EQ. EQ is about a third of your overall kind of personality. So there's personality, IQ, and EQ. So EQ makes up about a third of who you are. Okay, and again, keep in mind that grows and changes. So you can build that. Okay, it can get stronger over time. So it just takes practice. Okay, empathy. Okay, so this was kind of one of the subheadings of EQ. You can think of empathy as 3 levels. Cognitive, emotional, and compassionate. Now, when we're using cognitive empathy, think about a situation of, let's say when you go to see the doctors, okay? You go to the doctors, you have a cold or you have the flu, right? The doctor's going to ask you some questions. Do you have a temperature? Are you shivering? Have you been sneezing? Do you have a cough, right? Now, the doctor is coming from the aspect of caring in the sense of what are the systemic issues that he or she needs to identify to be able to give you medicine or not, okay? But you're probably just going to think, oh, this guy doesn't really care about me. This person is just like, jotting down my symptoms, right? It doesn't give you that warm, fuzzy feeling, right? They're just really just asking you a bunch of questions, right, to get information from you. Now, they're not doing anything wrong, right? Yes, it's part of their job, but that is an aspect of empathy. They are trying to find the best set of symptoms to give you the best prescription or the best medication that they can give you in that moment or the direction that you need to get in the best way possible, and that is empathy in itself. Now, the risk of cognitive empathy is that you may appear distant because your focus is really more analytical. It's more intellectual. It's more trying to make a decision. Okay, so that's one type of empathy, but it is still empathy, right? Because it's still coming from a place of concern, a place of trying to drive the right solution. Really good for negotiations as well, right? Because you're kind of not in it too deep, but yet you're still asking questions to kind of find out the best solution. On the flip side, and this really is the flip side, is emotional empathy. So think about a child falls down, scrapes their knee, bleeding knee, and they're crying. I have 3 nieces and nephews, so I see that all the time, and my heart goes out to them. I'm just like, how can I make them feel better? And the first thing I do is get up, grab them, and I hug them, because I'm like, I want to take your pain away from you. That is emotional empathy, okay? When you really feel the feelings, when you put yourself in their shoes to say, okay, I feel your pain, or I feel your sadness, or I feel your happiness, right? That is emotional empathy. So you can see that's very different from cognitive empathy, but it's not bad either, right? You need that too. What we're trying to strive for is something called compassionate empathy. That's a healthy balance of both. Now, if I go into work and I start hugging all my coworkers and say, hey, how's your weekend? It's really good to see you, big, strong hug. They're going to be looking at me. They're like, yeah, stay away. I don't want to talk to you, right? It's kind of weird. So you want to be careful, okay, right? You're going to have to figure out when to use which one, okay? And all of these grow over time as well. The better you get at compassionate empathy, the more balanced and more better decisions you're likely to make, okay? So sometimes we think too much emotionally, okay? Sometimes we think stepping away. You lose a little bit going both ways if it's not the appropriate situation. So, for example, if I'm bringing in too much emotions into work, that might not work too well. Or if I'm bringing in too much cognitive empathy into, family life, that might not be too good either, right? But if I come in with a balance of both and knowing kind of when to give the hugs, when to ask the questions, right, that's much more of an ideal situation. So that's what we want to do. We want to aim towards compassionate empathy. Empathy is not sympathy. Often people get these confused, okay? Empathy is really hearing the other person. You put yourself in their shoes and you kind of feel, get an idea of what they're going through, but you're not going in with necessarily a solution. Sympathy is maybe that you have been there and you're not projecting your feelings or your emotions onto that person. You're really, in empathy, you're really there for the person. It's not about you. You're not being reactive, okay? So you really want to listen. Okay, that's a key aspect of it. You really want to kind of step away and just kind of take in what it is that they're trying to get across. Not all empathy is the same, okay? There are levels of empathy, just like there are levels of happiness, sadness, fear, all those different things. For example, when you leave Friday, from work, you're happy to a certain level, but let's say a family member has a child, that's a different level of happy, right? Similarly for sadness, right? If you kick your foot and you stub your toe, that's one kind of sadness or pain you might fear. You might feel, sorry. But if you, let's say, you've got a puppy and it passes away, that's a different level of sadness. So empathy can change over time, just like feelings can also change over time. Okay, I actually just talked through all of this without going through the slides. So this was cognitive empathy, and this is basically the doctor example. That was emotional empathy. Again, really just focusing on the physical aspects of things, really feeling the feelings. And it's the compassionate, this is the balance, okay? And actually the key point here is you really are considering the person as a whole, okay? And going in with a fine balance of both kinds of empathy, and that's the ideal that we strive for. So I think I've said all of these things, right? But really allowing it to be about the other person, not about you, is key in empathy. Okay, awareness. Let's talk about that for a little bit. So awareness, if I had to just put it into a sentence, it's addressing your blind spots. Okay, very often we think we know what we're seeing, similar to empathy actually, right? But this is really being in the moment so you recognize this, right? You want to make sure you notice it for yourself, okay? And you also notice it about others. Again, there's going to be varying levels of awareness. When you're tired, you're going to have a certain level of awareness. When you're engaged, after lunch, there's going to be a certain level of awareness. So keep in mind that works for you and for the other person, right? So that's really what we want to do, and we want to address our blind spots. We come in with a lot of biases sometimes into any kind of situation. We make a lot of assumptions. We can be judgmental. So those are the things we want to catch ourselves. So again, that we make better decisions and we create more of an open space for the folks that we're engaging with. Let's talk about listening now, because I know somebody called this out earlier as well, I think back there, right? So active listening is huge. I think this is one of the most important skills that will probably lead you to amazing levels of empathy and EQ if we can get this right, okay? So a lot of the times, we are listening in a way that's not too conducive, because for the most part, we're listening to respond, okay? So we want to be able to take in everything that we're paying attention to when we're listening, especially when we're listening to another person, okay? We're going to do a quick exercise around this. I think we still have good time, so we're good. So you're going to pair up again, okay? And for a minute, well, actually, in your pairs, go ahead and find your pairs first. I want to make sure that you are completely paired up, because you have to be in pairs for this one. Okay, everyone's in pairs. Anybody missing a pair? One person? One person here missing a pair? No, pairs. Anybody missing a pair? I know one person here. Jay, can you participate in this one, please? We have one missing pair. Okay, so we're going to do this one in pairs. One of you is the listener. One of you is the speaker. Okay, so decide amongst yourselves who's going to be who. One person's the listener, meaning you'll be listening, and one person's the speaker, meaning you're going to be speaking. You've decided? Okay, so for a minute, speaker, talk about anything to the listener. Okay? 1 minute, all right? Go. Okay, so Remember that from the beginning? Okay, so listener, the speaker is now going to answer some questions about you. Okay, so this is just still one way. I'm going to put some questions up. Speaker, listener, I'm sorry, I'm mixing them up now. Listener, you're going to answer these questions about your speaker. Okay, so amongst yourselves, answer these questions. Actually, important element, don't look at your speaker while you're doing this. Sorry, turn around. Technical difficulties. Don't look at each other when you're answering. Go back to back, it's easier. No cheating. Okay. Let's see if I can get this right the next time round. Okay, round 2. You're going to swap roles. Listener becomes speaker and speaker becomes listener. You're going to do the same thing. You're going to talk about anything that you want. So I'll give you another minute to do that. Go. Remember, one person is the speaker and one person is the listener, so it's not a conversation. Okay, let me stop you there. Find a way now to talk to each other without looking at each other. That's the best way I'm going to describe that. So find a way to talk to each other, whether you want to close your eyes, go back to back, and I'm going to give the listener another set of questions. So now you should be in swapped roles, if we've done this right. And you're going to answer some questions to the other person, okay? Good, you're on, you can talk. So you're answering these questions to the other person. Okay, how was that? How was that? Actually, we're going to do a quick popcorn. So take your seats, actually. You can take your seats and we'll do a quick popcorn. How was that? Awesome, awesome. Okay, how many of you got them right the first time round, the questions? Were you able to respond to them? Almost. Yeah, so I know, I did. So my fault as a facilitator, I did not set up the right environment for that. But how about the second round? Perfect? You were able to get it all? Because the questions were different, right? Yeah. Okay, cool. So what changed in your listening the second time round? So you paid attention. Okay, so that's exactly what we're talking about, right? There's 3 levels of listening, okay? One is your internal, one is your focused, and one is your global. Internal is basically when we're talking to each other, we're typically thinking about what we're going to respond with, okay? That's your internal, right? You're really listening to speak. Your second is you're listening to hear, okay? So you're intently listening to the person, you're taking in what they're saying, and you know, you're good with that. The third one is what we strive for. It's global listening. We want to take it all in. We want to also take in the environment, right? What was the person doing with their hands? What were they wearing? What's the color of their eyes? Taking in the full picture, fully engaging and fully paying attention, okay? So that is really the aspect of active listening that we want to get to, and hopefully we still have a presentation to go through. Wow, I think I'm technically jinxed today. Let's see what's going on. Okay, still running. I think we're okay. All right, let's see. Obviously, I was not paying attention to my environment to see where the end of the podium stops. Okay. All right, so let's keep going. Okay, so mapping techniques is the last area that I want to talk to you about, and I do see we're running short on time now, so I'll go a little bit quicker on these, right? Mapping techniques. How many of you are familiar with mapping techniques? Mind mapping, impact mapping, story mapping. Story mapping? Okay, all right, because I've got that on my list here. So visualizing, doing graphic organization is really what we want to get to, okay? Basically, it's a collaborative effort. We want to get the right people in the room. Right people means everyone who can make a decision in the process. We want to engage with them, okay? We want to find patterns, right? We might find them repeated over time. We might find them just in that instance. It's so much better if you're able to visualize because you can get a very complex idea out across, to a large group of people without really trying to figure out what the narrative is. So mind maps is the simplest one. I was going to have you do one, but just in the interest of time, I'm just going to talk you through it at this moment. Mind maps are the most basic, simplest version of visual organization or graphic organization you can probably think about. You start with a central topic, okay, and you just branch out from it. You can make it as vivid as you want. You can add pictures, you can add colors, elements, all sorts of things to it. And it's really just a good way, again, images over writing, okay? It's the whole brain processing with your hands being engaged, and you're putting out a lot of information. So the cognitive processing is happening as you're drawing out these elements, okay? So that's key to why, visualizing is very, very important. We were going to try it, but I'll pause this because I don't think we're going to have time. So these are typically mind map guidelines. You start in the center. You want to add color, you want to add images if you want. Very useful for note-taking. I'm actually trying to get better at my note-taking in visualizing it in more mind maps. So I typically use mind maps for an idea or some concept I have to get across, but now even my note-taking, because I write pages and pages of notes, I'm trying to turn more into mind maps and visual images. So again, helps with the cognitive processing. Story mapping, I heard a few people were familiar with it. Okay, again, very tip of the iceberg is what I'm going to tell you right now. There's a whole book on it. Keep in mind there's a whole book on probably everything that I've talked about, probably more than one book, I would say. Jeff Patton, creator of user story mapping, a real leader in product development and ideating around it. He's created a really cool technique that helps break down large pieces of work, large goals, and identifies chunks of work where you can take it all the way to user stories, right? Is everyone familiar with user stories? Okay, all right, I think we're okay then. Okay, so you want to start with the... 5 minutes? Yes, okay. Start with the overarching goal, okay? Identify your users and the people that are going to be part of the process. And this is what a story map could potentially look like. Basically, you have the big chunk items on the top, okay? As a group, you get together, you discuss them. The colors are indicated for Post-its. This is best done with Post-its because you want to be able to move things around, okay? If you have all the right people in the room, which is your business, your engineers, stakeholders, you are going to get to the best level of getting to your goal and getting the ideas out. And basically, you start breaking down these big chunks of work so that you can then organize it, prioritize it in a way that you can actually get it down to user story level. You would then walk through a line through the flow, okay, that will actually get you to your release level. I'm more than happy to take questions at the end of this. I know I'm rushing through it right now, so just bear with me because I kind of lost track of time a little bit. So that's user story mapping. Very useful, again, very visual. It's very easy to just use this as your backlog. I've seen many teams where they'll keep the Post-its up and they'll use it as their backlog and get work done. You're typically going to frame the journey, so that's basically the activity that we just saw on the visual. These are basically the steps that get you through to the end of the user story map. Get the right people in the room. This applies for any kind of group activity. Make sure you have the right people in the room no matter what. Impact mapping is the other one I wanted to talk to you about. So again, a whole new book on this one, or a whole book on it. Lots of really good blog posts and articles. And it's a similar concept that can get you to user stories as well. Here's what you're going to start off with. You want to identify your why, which is your goal. Who are all the actors that you have that are going to participate in this goal that you're trying to achieve. You start talking about the how and then the what. And if I was to break that down, okay, so I've got the goal, the actor, the impact, and the deliverables on the top. Those are essentially those columns that you break down into. That would have been the activity, but essentially this is what an impact mapping would look like. Okay, you could really hone in on what the individual pieces are, but you have to start with a well-written goal. So the big yellow square, that's your goal. Make sure your goal is very clear and everyone's agreed to it. If you get through the exercise, you can draw a path through it and you can map it back to your user story. Okay, so in the black circles, I've got as a somebody, I want to do whatever so that I can achieve the goal. Okay, so you can break that down. So those are two just concepts of breaking down big chunk items or a big goal, get the right people in the room, and get to a user story. These activities can take half a day to a day or maybe longer, but really if you have the right people in there, you're going to end up with something that's very, very useful. This was the last video. It will be in the slides. Obviously, I'm going to have issues trying to show it right now. But that's essentially it. So don't forget to dive deeper. Stay curious. Experiment with all these ideas. Here's our sponsors, so thank you to them. And this is me. So feel free to connect. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Take care.